just want to be clear about what visual aids are. I think most people think of only PowerPoint or Google Slides, just a slide deck is the only kind of visual aid you can use. That is not true. You can use a lot of other things as visual aids, and in fact, if you do that, you're likely to be unique if you're presenting with a lot of other people presenting at the same time. It's likely to stand out, which is good. I mean, you could use a phone as a visual aid when it comes to something about privacy laws. You could use an acceptance letter to college. This is a dental bill, but you could use an acceptance letter to college if you're going to talk about something like relieving student debt, right? You can weave in physical visual aids that will be really helpful. I recommend that. But you also want to think about your slide decks, and I think most people think about slide decks when it comes to visual aids. The number one single most important piece of advice I have for you when it comes to putting together your slide deck, you have to approach it the same way you approach the rest of your presentation. So you want your presentation to be engaging, right? You have to make your slide deck engaging. You want your presentation to be concise, right? Not wordy, not full of lots of other information. You need to do the same thing with your slide deck, right? Limit the amount of text. You want your presentation to be thematically and coherent and organized. It's the same thing for your slide deck. You have to make sure there's thematic consistency. You don't want to have egregious mistakes in your presentation. Same thing for your slide deck. You want to make sure that you've looked through it, there are no typos, there's no words going on the different pages. And here's what I'll say that I've found. The people who tend to prepare for their presentations are the same people who put a lot of effort into their slides, and it shows. And I'll say one last thing about this. When it comes to your slide deck, the goal of your slide deck is to complement what you are doing as a presenter. It does not run your presentation, and it should not be, especially for like a 4 to 5 minute presentation, it should not be the situation where somebody can just look at your slides and know everything about your presentation, right? You are the presenter. Your slides are there to complement what you're doing. With that said, let's talk about some things we can do that make for really persuasive, engaging slide decks for a 4 to 5 minute presentation. So the first thing I want to point out is that you do not have to be an art designer to have nice looking slides. So let me give you an example. This is from a website called Slides Carnival. You can find sites like this where basically the slides are going to be visually compelling, they're going to be designed nicely, and you're essentially using a template. There's nothing wrong with that. That's totally acceptable. In fact, I would recommend it. Rather than trying to reinvent the way slides should look, you can see here that there's a visually, thematically consistent component to it. They're using this kind of shape, right? And I can use these different slides, right? I can take these and I can copy them where I need them. But what they've done that I think is so meaningful here, really two things. The first one is that you see a lot of fashionable design in here. They're using a lot of sans serif fonts. If you don't know what sans serif fonts are, you can look that up. They're also using a lot of slides that draw your attention to one large thing, right? Here's a good example, big concept, right? And what they're trying to do is point out to you that we don't want a bunch of bullet points. In fact, even when you want to do something like bullet points, it might be smarter for you to go to a column setup, right? And what they've done here is there's 3 different columns. And so you might have something like that. You might have a diagram, right? You might use a table. You might use a map. When you want to present numbers, you can present them in a really large way. And I think if you look at a lot of nice slide design online, you'll get an idea for what is fashionable and what is impactful. And then based on that, you can go ahead and implement your own slides. Feel free to use Slide Carnival. Feel free to use a website called Canva as an example. So Canva is nice because there are a lot of great designs. The downside to Canva is that you have to work within Canva, right? You can't take a Canva presentation and put it in PowerPoint. But you can see the slides are nicely designed. There's a lot of what we would call white space, although technically it's yellow, but the idea is that they're not filling the entire screen. They're really kind of drawing your attention to certain things, right? Here you can see, again, a lot of space, very visually consistent. Even if they're using different colors, there's a lot of visual consistency in these slides, and it makes it look really nice. And anyone that were to click on, right, you'd see that. You see the visual consistency. They're sticking to a couple colors, they're sticking to some fonts, they're sticking to some setups. You know, rarely will you see bullet points, and here they're using bullet points, and that's okay, but it's rare, right? It's not like every slide is dominated by bullet points. A lot of big numbers, right? Because they're trying to draw your attention to one particular thing. So I would strongly recommend that you look up other slides designs online and use one of them, potentially from canva.com, Slides Carnival, and there's other sites, right? I'm just giving you some examples. Let me show you what some students have done that have been, really nicely in terms of visual consistency. So you can see here that we would expect this kind of yellow/picture consistency to continue. Large text, I probably would have made this bigger, but you're seeing the same thing here, right? Really just a focus on less than 10 words, right? We don't need a ton of text because you as a speaker are going to be talking quite a bit, right? But you want to draw our attention visually to one particular thing. I love this kind of setup. So this kind of setup, what it does is it takes 3 things that most students would tend to put in bullet points, and it turns them into a kind of more visual layout. So we have 3 different things, and they're put in circles. So there's thematic consistency, and they're laid out this way, which as an audience member is, again, more engaging rather than listing these as 3 bullet points. I think this kind of titling is really effective. I would even push this further, and I would say that when you do have your titles on your slides, you would want to actually, don't put something like why this works. Give us a sentence as to why it works. This works because it rebuilds student attitudes towards school. Use that as your title. We have a tendency to want to ask questions in our title. Don't ask questions. You can ask the question yourself, right, as a speaker, orally, but you want to make sure that you're writing that out. Okay, let's look at some other slides that I think look nice. You can see here that this student really highlighted particular things, and again, the visual consistency is nice. She literally highlighted them, right? Here's an example of something, a way you could improve this, right? So you can see there's this black and yellow theme, and what I would do is I would take this information, and whether she found this somewhere else or whether she made it herself, I would make this graph thematically consistent with these other slides. So what it would mean is using yellow, black as an example, right? Maybe we want to get rid of reading, math, and writing and only include the totals because the other ones don't really matter as much, right? They're not that different from each other in terms of how they stand out. And you'd want to do it just yellow and black because, again, we want to stick to the same thematic consistency. All right, now I want to show you some things that presenters have done in the past that I'd like to see you avoid. In some cases, there are things you should never do. In other cases, there are things where the presenters just didn't really work hard enough to make their presentations engaging. And so I want you to look at these and say, hey, how can I work past these before I present? So this presentation is an example of something where it's just, I don't know that we're thinking about the audience too much. So we have a really basic font. We have this muscly strongman guy kicking a soccer ball. It says pptbackgrounds.net. Is this background really going to do anything for you? Is somebody going to look at this and go, yep, well, that's a man kicking a soccer ball, and therefore I am for this idea? No, that's not going to help. That's not going to help. And then we have, not only do we have kind of a cheesy, clip art thing, we have another, stock photo on top of that. It's too much. And we also have a lot of bullet points. We don't want this many bullet points. I would take something like this number right here, and I'd make it the focus of this slide. I don't know where to focus. I understand some things are bolded. That's a positive, but go further. Bold this, make this bigger, make this huge, where we're really focusing on the fact that, for a family that is in this situation, 9% of their income would go towards sports, right? Really draw our attention to that. Here's another example. If you're using Times New Roman, that's probably a problem. If you have no idea what I'm talking about when I say using Times New Roman, it is the most standard basic font there is, and it doesn't engage the audience. Your font choice is kind of like the way that you would speak. So if you had all caps and you had some crazy looking font, that would be listened to differently. The person would read it in their mind differently. Times New Roman is basically saying, go to sleep, right? It's the most basic, boring font there is. Find something else. This one is rough. Not only do we have a bunch of bullet points here, we also have 3 pictures of which one has bullet points inside of it. This is like bullet point inception. There are too many bullet points going on. It's just not visually compelling whatsoever. Bullet points, a caption for a picture that has Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. I know these things were links before, but why is it here, right? Why did you include that in your slides? We're not going to click on these things in your slides. So it's just a great example of not having paid attention to what you're doing, just kind of being kind of sloppy with how you put stuff together. This is a tough slide to read, right? There is just a lot going on here. I don't know what I'm supposed to look at. And if that's the case, if I can't tell what I'm supposed to focus on right when I look at your slide, we got a problem. This is another one where, I mean, look, you're taking screenshots of things. Like, you can do better than this, right? You can type that information in. If you're taking screenshots of something, that's rough. Again, too many different things going on here. We have a meme in the middle of this, and then I don't know what this picture is. I have no idea why these two pictures are being included and what they're of. This is, I mean, there are a million things happening in this slide. I don't even know what I'm supposed to look at. I don't even know what I am looking at, to be honest. And that's a problem. In the end, you want to make sure that every single second you are asking your audience to pay attention to something, they feel like it was worth their time. So pay attention to every word you put on your slides, every image, every font choice, every single time you decide to include an additional slide in your presentation itself. What are you doing to make sure that that slide is visually engaging to your audience, is thematically consistent with the rest of your slides and with your presentation, and helps you tell the story that you want to tell? If you do that, I promise you, your slides will be better, your presentation will be better, and you will have so much more pride and satisfaction in the work that you're doing.